Hello everyone, I'm Luke DuPont, and today I wanted to talk about Linux. Now, I'm new to Linux, but I thought that I would like to capture my first impressions and my learning process as I go. So today I'm going to be talking about my initial experience with Linux so far. I've been using it as my primary operating system for about 2 or 3 months now, and talk about the things that I like about it, and why I've chosen to use it. So, Linux has a lot of people don't even know what Linux is, of course, but for those that do, it has a image of being um, difficult to learn, not yet a mature system, um, kind of only for really, really tech savvy people or programmers. And it has maybe not having any software for it, all that sort of thing, not being able to run games. So, this is kind of what people think of when they think of Linux. But my experience has been very different, and I've been really uh, pleasantly surprised. Um, So I think Linux has really matured in recent years, and has really become an excellent operating system, particularly in the last 4 to 5 years, 3 to 5 years. It's really come into its own and um, is really an excellent, just as good as anything that Apple or Microsoft makes at this point. Um, so let's start with software, because this was my biggest concern coming into Linux. Is that I was concerned that there would be if I would be able to find a wide variety of software and the kind of software that I like to use and need. Um, and in this, I've been really surprised. Linux has a lot of great software, and actually, I was surprised a lot of the software that I use on Windows, because I tended to use free alternatives to perhaps paid applications like Microsoft Excel and such. Um, I found that all of those are actually, or a lot of them are open source applications that I already used on Windows, but they were they're on Linux, and a lot of them have their roots in Linux. Uh, and interestingly enough, on this note, I also found that a lot of them actually run better on Linux. They're more optimized, they're less buggy, um, and all that sort of thing. So overall, I've not been able to, I've never yet had an application that I couldn't run on Linux and have not been able to find, like, either haven't been able to run it or haven't been able to find a very good alternative. Um, Now, if you're critically dependent on some proprietary software that is not available on Linux, like Adobe Photoshop, for example, you may not be able to switch over entirely. But still, the ecosystem of software that's available on Linux is really, really good. Um, it surprised me. Now, how about games? Because I also like to play games, and I know probably a lot of viewers do too. Well, I've been surprised there too. You can get Steam on Linux, uh, especially on Ubuntu. It runs just fine, and Ubuntu derived systems. And let's see. So I don't have a ton of Steam games. I have a pretty small collection. But of the ones that I do have, let's see. Uh, Library. Oh, here we go. So I have 49 games on Steam, and of those, over half, 28 games, over half are available on Linux. And if you like running, if you're like me and you like smaller indie games or retro games, that sort of thing, most of those are on Linux. You will find some bigger titles that usually, sometimes the big AAA games don't release for Linux because they're going after the biggest market. But I've been surprised. There's a lot of games available on Linux, and they run fine. And a lot of them that, even if they're not on Steam, you can often run them with emulation in something like Wine, if you are willing to put a little bit of effort into configuring that. So that's where I stand for software on Linux, basically. Really nothing that I've needed that I haven't found. So how about so why Linux in the first place? Why use Linux? Well, I've really enjoyed. At first, I was just kind of curious and just wanted to learn about it. But the thing that really drew me into Linux is that, and I think the biggest appeal is that it puts the user first. It puts the user in the driver's seat and in control, and it respects both your privacy and your authority, if you will. And this is really something that no other operating system currently does. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, let's take, let's start a little bit. I'll make a brief point on privacy, but a lot of operating systems these days, such as, let's take Windows 10 for example, collects a lot of data on the user, on what you're doing with your machine, what you have installed, all this sort of thing. And that's that's certainly a privacy concern, and it's even worse for mobile operating systems. Things like iOS or Android, where they basically track literally everything you do, where you are with your phone, all that sort of thing. But let's say that you don't even really care that much about that. What else? Well, so let's take Windows for example, because it's the operating system that I have the most experience in at this point, and probably most people do as well. So, what do I mean by respecting the user's authority and really putting the user in the driver's seat, if you will? So for example, on Linux, when I install a piece of software, it never just decides on its own that it's going to start up with my PC every time. so when I boot up, it will start on boot. It never installs piggyback junkware, where if you don't uncheck all the boxes, make sure you check all those tick boxes correctly, then you get a bunch of junkware that's not what you're trying to install. That's very frowned upon in Linux. And you don't have applications and daemons and things running in the background that are always checking for updates and nagging you about updates. You don't have the intrusive Windows update thing that just pops up and says Windows needs to update, and would you like to update now, and it has a countdown timer. If you don't notice it, or you don't postpone it in time, it just reboots your operating system and starts installing updates without any user input. So these things don't happen on Linux, and so much more things like that. It really gives you control over your system, and And the other thing is that it's in regards to this topic, is that you really have control over your system. You can change anything on your system that you want. You can dig into the deep, the deep files in the operating system and screw up everything if you want. But of course, you need root privileges for that. So it's not like anyone can just come and mess with your computer. And it's not like perhaps you have to know what you're doing to even do that. But you can also configure your programs exactly how you want. You can configure your desktop. It really, really does. It empowers the user. I think that's the best way of putting it. Linux really empowers the user. It doesn't try so hard to make things user friendly that it then limits you. At the same time, it's pretty user friendly. That's another conception that many people have, is that it's not user friendly. And well, this depends on the distribution of Linux that you're running. Certainly, if you're running something like Arch, then no, it's not user friendly. But why would you be if that's what you're looking for? There are many Linux distributions like Linux Mint or Elementary OS that are very, very new user friendly. But still, even then, if you want to learn more and do more, you have the power to. You're not restricted. So Linux is a very open system. It's has a lot of diversity. There are many different flavors of Linux called distributions, and you can choose and pick the one that is right for you. I really like this because for me, one of the biggest reasons I came to Linux is exactly this: is I like to be able to configure my system as I want, and I like to be able to do more with my system without it getting in the way. So it's a really, really, what is the word? Low friction environment that you can set up as you want. So what kind of things can you do in terms of this? Well, let's take our desktop environment, for example. So right now I'm using what's called GNOME 3. This is what this desktop environment is called. The graphical user interface here. So you can see how I have this applications bar on the left here, launcher on the left. I have all of my applications, and I can switch between desktops. I can type in the top bar for what I'm searching for. So let's say I'm looking for, I don't know, Chrome, right? And I can search for things on my computer and launch it up if I want to, which I don't want to right now. But so this is just one desktop, one of many. There are actually a lot out there, so let's look at them real quick. So when you boot up, you can actually install multiple desktops and switch between them at will, as you want. So for example, you might get a menu like this, where you can pick between KDE or LXDE or Ubuntu XFCE. Ubuntu would be Unity. And they all look different. So for example, this is a very lightweight distribution called XFCE. It's very customizable though. It doesn't always look like this. You can make it look like a lot of things. Here's the one I'm running, GNOME 3. And there are others like this is Cinnamon. This is LXDE. It's even lighter weight than XFCE. There's also KDE and Budgie. There are tons of different options that you have, which is really wonderful, because you can find what you like. You can find the thing that works well for you. And within any one of these desktop environments, or even just excluding the desktop environment altogether, you can customize everything, pretty much. Whether it's to do with your system, like how it boots and how it's configured, or a lot of applications are very configurable. So, for example, what I have here, I'll just show you a little bit of this because it's really one of the things I love the most about Linux. So most of your applications are stored, most of your configuration for applications are stored in simple text files. In fact, your configuration files, even for system stuff, is just simple text files that you can edit. You can easily make the changes you want to if you know how to use the text editor. So let's take, for example, my bashrc file, and I'll give you a little. So what is bash? Well, bash is the command line for Linux, the command interpreter, if you will. So when I say things like ls to list my files, I'm going to get into the command line a little bit because I feel like it's an important part of Linux, and while it's intimidating to a lot of new people, it's really awesome. It's really, really powerful and really convenient, and just makes life easy in many ways. So I can configure bash. I can configure this language here. So how do I do that? Well, I can just edit a simple text file. So if I go, let's see, to my home folder, and I have to turn on hidden files. So show hidden files, and we're looking for .bashrc. So these dot files here are hidden files that contain configuration for your programs. Okay, here we have it. So this is my bashrc file, and I can do things like change the color of my prompt and things like that. But I can also set things to run when it starts up. So, for example, I can remove any programs here, and it should start up with just a blank prompt. Yep, there we go. But I can also do some fun things. So, for example, let me make this bigger so it's easier to see on camera. Oh, how do I do that? I think I have to go to options. Control plus didn't work. Font? No, don't use system font. Use something bigger. There we go. That should be easy to see. So, this all looks complicated, I'm sure, but bear with me. So let's say I want to run a program on start. Whenever I start my bashrc file, I want to run something. Well, what program can I run? Well, you can actually do anything from the command line that you can do by clicking around on things. So, for example, if I want to run, if I want to open my file manager. In this case, I'm using a file manager called Nautilus, and I can see my files. I can run that from the command line just by typing the name of the program. Well, let's say I want to do that every time I open my bashrc. I want it to run Nautilus. I don't know why, but let's just say I wanted to do that. Then I just add that line to my bashrc configuration file, and then when I hit Control-Alt-T and open a terminal, when I open my terminal, I also get a file browser. So that's pretty cool, right? But let's do something that makes a little more sense. So how about that cool program I had open earlier? How about this one? Oops. This one called NeoFetch. That's pretty cool, right? So how about we have that greet us in the terminal? So we just write NeoFetch, save, and next time we open the terminal, that's what we get. You can also make aliases. Now an alias is like making your own command. So let's say that I want to run NeoFetch, but I want to call it, what do I want to call it? Let's call it pretty. Pretty text. No. Yeah, something like that. So we'll say alias pretty prompt equals NeoFetch. Now that's not a very good alias because it's more typing than the original command, but we'll go with it for now. It's a demonstration of proof of concept. Okay, so now whenever I type pretty prompt, I get that application. So there is so much you can do with this. You can do some really fun things like let's alias moo to calsay. I think I already did this. Calsay, pipe through lolcat to get some fun colors. And then we can run moo, and we get a cow greeting us. That's cool. Another fun thing that I like to do is there's a command or a program called fortune that like reads a fortune, and you can pipe that into calsay, and then you can make it, instead of a cow, you can make it a tux penguin, and then you can make it all colored with lolcat. So let's give that a shot. Let's have that greet us. That can be our greeting whenever we open the terminal. That's what we see. And that's what we get. So this is the kind of fun and cool thing that you can do really easily in Linux, simply because of the fact that everything is highly configurable and easy to do. It's just a bunch of text files and you just edit them. You don't have to be even that knowledgeable about programming to do so. This is not really programming. This is just I'm just typing commands. I mean, if you can find, like, learn your way around the terminal and learn some basic commands, the names of some basic programs like gedit, you can do this too. It's not difficult at all. Which brings me to my next point. The next thing I love about Linux. The terminal. So this terminal here, or this terminal here, all the same thing. It's just a drop-down terminal, very convenient. This is so nice and convenient. This is actually what got me interested in Linux. Is I started. You can now run this the terminal only. You can't run the graphical applications, but you can run this on Windows in what's called the Bash for Windows, or the Windows subsystem for Linux, which you can look up if you're interested in, and you can play around with this on Windows. But it's really, really fun. It's one of the big things that brought me to Linux, because basically anything you can do by clicking around and using the graphical user interface, you can do in the terminal. And there are so many great and wonderful terminal applications that are really fun to use. So the terminal at first is something that may seem rather intimidating and difficult for most users, and it certainly was for me too. But it's not that difficult, and once you learn your way around and you get comfortable with it, it's really, really cool what you can do. Um, so, for example, what you might not know is there are so many terminal applications for Linux. So, for example, there's HTOP. This is a task manager. So I can see what's going on with my system, what's running. I can kill processes and things if I want. Very cool. There are things like text editors like Vim. This is a very powerful text editor, kind of difficult to learn. It uses modes, but it's very, very cool. So, for example, like if I have something in quotes here, then I can say like, it's like typing, it's like you're speaking your own language. So I can say like, visually select, I want to visually select everything inside of these quotes, not quotes, parentheses. So I say visual, V, I, inside, and where is that? Close parentheses. And I visually select everything inside the close parentheses. So you can very quickly like, VI, boom. Whoops, I did the wrong thing. But you can also, so that's VI and parentheses to select everything inside the parentheses. Well, I can also do something like delete, DI, inside parentheses, and I delete it. Then I can undo with U. I can do something like copy a whole line, like yank, and then paste. Paste a million times. I can DD is to delete one line. I can 15 DD. I delete 15 lines. So it's very, very cool, very, very powerful. And again, you can configure this in a simple text file, and it is highly, highly configurable. This is one of the most powerful text editors that is out there for things like coding. A much easier one to use, though not as powerful, is Nano. And so I can just type in here like you normally would. There's no modes. And I can save or use you can see all the commands are listed at the bottom. Very simple. But I'm just going to exit and not save anything. What else do we have? Oh, you can browse the web. Now this is cool. Browse the web in a terminal. I tend to use this on my low power devices that don't run a graphical web browser very well, because web browsers are really, really, really heavy and slow. They're very poorly optimized. So something like a Raspberry Pi, you can easily run these terminal applications. So let's search for cats. And the cool thing about this one, the really cool thing about this one, is that you can actually see images. So if I go to image results here, then wow, I'm inside a graphic. Terminals don't usually have graphics like this. So this is really, really cool. I can also do things like browse YouTube. How cool is that? So watch YouTube viewer. And let's search for one of my favorite, Brian Lunduke. Favorite YouTubers. And let's watch number 2. And there it goes. So I don't even have to open my web browser. How cool is that? You can also do fun things like, I can play videos. Let me see. CD videos. So I can do things like, well, I have VLC installed, but one cool thing you can do with VLC is set the video out to Keka, which is like a text rendering program, and then play your video and have it render in text. Unknown operator. Oh, maybe that's capital V. Let's try this. Yep. Oh. Your input cannot be opened. Really? Let's try InPlayer. Well, you can Google that if you're interested. But actually, how do I? It's interesting. Why does that not work? I think I have some other videos maybe in my home folder. Oh well. Yeah, I'll forget that for now. But you can do it. Just Google ASCII video YouTube. No, not YouTube. ASCII video Linux. You can use either VLC or InPlayer, but VLC produces nicer results generally. So that's a little bit about the Linux terminal. Now, related to this is shell scripts. And something really cool about this is that you can use, you can write your own shell scripts that execute bash commands in the terminal here, and then do what you want with those scripts, like assign them to hotkeys or something. So for example, I wrote a simple script here called min.sh. Let me open it up. And what it does is just minimize a window. And well, let me explain how this works. So there's a cool program called xdotool, and you can use this program to do all kinds of things with your desktop, like you can type, like emulate keystrokes. So for example, I can type hello, how are you, right? And it types hello, how are you into my window. Now, I can use a tool like watch. The watch command just like runs another command every so often. So maybe like let's watch date. And well, there's not much to see changing because the date doesn't change that often. But oh, we just saw, yeah, we see some seconds going by. So we can quit that. But let's do something cooler. Let's watch xdotool type hello. Oh no, how about this? I'm working hard writing this document, I swear. Yeah, so let's do this. Now, let's open text editor, like gedit. Where is that at? Accessories? And what do we get? Apparently we get nothing. Why is that? Oh, unterminated quoted string. Whoops. xdotool type. Unterminated quoted string. watch xdotool, type testing. And there you go. So what's happening here is it's just typing testing every 2 seconds. So how cool is that? But we can do more useful things. So what we can also do is things like minimize windows or move them around, or other things. So if I look at this shell script, it does something very simple. It uses xdotool to minimize the currently active window. And so what we can do is make that into a script. And now when I run this, it minimizes my window. Now, why is this cool? Well, not only can we use this for our programs, but we can go and let's say we want to make a hotkey to do something that isn't supported. Well, I can make a hotkey because I can use the terminal. I can hook up terminal commands to hotkeys and then run any bash script or command that I want. So this is really cool because you can make your own custom hotkeys and things. So like if I go to my settings, let me get there this way. Why does that come up? That's not what I want. Settings, keyboard, and I look at my shortcuts, then you can see where I've actually configured this script here, this min.sh, to be called whenever I hit the super minus key. Super and minus. Now super is just your Windows key or your command key if you're on a Mac. And so now I'm just going to hit that key, those buttons, and I can minimize my windows. So this is one of the things that just makes Linux so fun for me, is the fact that you can, and especially the terminal, you can make all of these things interact together. In my bash, my Vim that I was showing you earlier. So let's say that I have some text that I want to look up. Testing 1, 2, 3. Sometimes I work on code, and within that is let's say like some comments in Japanese. Where is my Japanese input? Here we go. Nihongo desu. Okay, so let's say that I don't know what this whoopsie, I don't know what this word means. Well, I can select it and then hit Control L. I think it was Control L. Apparently not. Let's look that up. So it should be in my vimrc somewhere. Again, my configuration file. Well, first I should show you the dictionary, shouldn't I? So let's quit this. So SDCV is a dictionary, and I can just type whatever I want to look up. So let's say I want to look up, I don't know, Nihongo, and I get the definition. I can also do the other way, depending on what dictionaries you have installed. I have a Japanese to English and an English to Japanese dictionary. So, ta-da! So this is very convenient, and it's even more convenient when you use it with the drop-down terminal, because it's just like, oh, what does this thing mean? Or how do I say this? Right? But, so I can now mix and match. So I can use this program inside of Vim by putting it in my Vim RC file. Well, actually, I can execute commands outside of Vim. So if I'm in Vim, then I can do things like if I use a what is it called? Exclamation point, I can execute a command outside of Vim. So like I can stcv and then type the word I'm looking for, hit enter, and I get it. But let's say I wanted to make that a hotkey. Well, I can do that. So somewhere in here I have that configured, and it is Control L. Oh, I'm supposed to copy it first. Whoopsie. So when I go to Vim, yeah. So I think what I do is copy this to the clipboard. And then I hit Control L. Yep, that's it. I changed my default clipboard, which is why it wasn't working. So this is the kind of cool way in which you can use all of these different programs together, and they're all very convenient and very cool. There are also things like a file browser, so I can browse my file system visually in the terminal, sort of visually. There's things like the web browser I already showed you. There's the YouTube viewer. Yeah, there's just so many cool programs and utilities that you can do, and some of them you can hook up to your like keyboard shortcuts and things and run shell scripts. It's all really, really cool. Even if you're not a big programmer or anything like that, you don't have to be. You can still have fun, and you can learn this stuff. It's not that difficult. So that's another big reason that I love Linux. Let's see, what else? Yeah. So basically, in the end, and just the philosophy of Linux. Linux is a really cool system because it's open and it's free, which means anyone can view the source code, anyone can modify it, make their own flavor of Linux, and you have something for everybody. You have easier to use. If you don't ever want to touch a terminal, like I'm doing here, you just, no, it just scares you. Then you can use things like, there are great options out there. There are distributions of Linux like Linux Mint or Elementary OS that are very easy to use. You don't ever have to touch a command line if you don't want to. You can do everything graphically. And there are, on the flip side, if you really, really like tinkering and getting down into the deep end of things, there are things like Arch Linux that are very, very like build your own system from the ground up. So there's really something for everybody, and part of what makes that possible is the fact that it's not controlled by anyone. It's not a single product. It's not controlled by any one company. It's anybody with an interest can work on and develop it. And this is really cool. This is one of the things that I really like about it. And if you have a problem with your own system, then a lot of times you can fix it yourself, or you can get somebody else. You can get maybe someone else will fix it, and you can Google online and you can get their fix. Whereas, if that were maybe if you own Windows or you own Mac, then there's a lot of times there's just nothing you can do other than wait and hope that Microsoft or Apple, patches what you want, or the software developer patches what you want or adds a feature that you need. On Linux, a lot of time, and with open source software, you can do it yourself. You can go get the source code, change what you want, and there you go. Or someone else might do it for you. You don't necessarily have to be a programmer to get the benefits of open source software. So these are some of the great things about Linux. In addition, Linux is very secure, very safe. Part of that is because it's a smaller target. There aren't as many people on Linux, and so not as many people target it with viruses and such. But also, it's also a very secure system. Generally, to install software or anything like that, to make changes that are important, you need root privileges. And so unless you give a application those privileges, your password, and this is different from the way Microsoft Windows does it, even though they kind of have that administration thing now to install software, it's not the same. It's a little more secure on Linux. But generally, you don't have to worry about viruses and things. It's very safe and secure. It respects your privacy, doesn't collect data on you. And lastly, but not least, Linux is really the future. I think so. Linux is already dominant in every single market space except for, well, pretty much every single market space except for desktop PCs and laptops. And I think that's mainly these days just because they're not sold with Linux already installed in the stores. A little bit of that is because, it's maybe it's unfamiliar for a lot of people, and some distributions are harder to use. There's no really big distribution aside from Linux Mint that is really easy, I think. Though, well, I might take that back. There are a good number of them. Linux Mint and Ubuntu's not bad either, as well as Elementary OS. These are all pretty good choices for newbies. I'm using Ubuntu simply because it's the one that is kind of recommended that you start off with to learn, because it's a base for a lot of systems. It's a base for a lot of other Linux systems. And it's very easy to Google because lots and lots of people use it. So if you're on Ubuntu and you need to know how to do something, it's very easy to get the answer by typing into Google. So yeah, that's kind of where it is. If you've not tried Linux before, even if you're not super tech savvy, if you're just curious and you enjoy computers and you would like to try new things, definitely give Linux a try. Download, a good thing to use is VirtualBox. If you don't want to install it fully yet, you can download VirtualBox right here, and you can run you can just get a ISO image of Ubuntu or something, or and install it and give it a try. And you can play around with it in VirtualBox and don't have to worry about messing up your system or anything like that. And that's a good way to find which distribution you like too. Ones to check out are things like I had a list. Let's see. Vim. Oops, I'm inside VirtualBox. That's okay. Except that I don't have Vim. I have Nano. Yeah, so things like so Ubuntu, if you are a little bit tech savvy, and you don't mind doing a little bit of configuration and things, Ubuntu is a good one to start with, a very good one. If you are more the type of person who wants everything to work out of the box and you don't want to do any kind of setup whatsoever, now don't get me wrong, Ubuntu is easy, but even easier than that, and you don't have to touch a terminal, is things like Linux Mint and Elementary OS. I haven't really looked at Elementary, but it's supposed to be pretty good. And if you are really more of the techie person, you can also look at Debian, Arch, maybe things like Fedora is not so big anymore, but you can look at Fedora. I would personally recommend starting with something Debian based, like Debian, Elementary OS, Mint, Ubuntu, that sort of thing. And if you really, Arch is really different. Is really from the ground type of system. There's also things like OpenSUSE, which I really don't know much about. There are really a lot of different flavors for Linux, and you can find one that suits you. So, that's pretty much everything that I wanted to say. So far, I've had a really good experience. I've really enjoyed the amount of customization I can do with my system. I've really enjoyed the control you have over your system. It really empowers you and gets out of your way at the same time. And it's really maturing as a system. There's now really a lot of software, and there are no real pain points. It's all been pretty smooth. So if you're interested in computers in general, give Linux a try. Look at different distributions and have fun. So that's all for now. Thanks for watching.